come to the Lake District, they said. Isn't it going to be beautiful, they said. Enjoy the views, they said. First of all, apologies for taking so long to upload another video. This was meant to be uploaded back in October, and I'll explain why it's been delayed by the end of the video. It has nothing to do with the car. The Ioniq 5 is still running brilliantly, but I thought I'll upload this now. My wife and I, back at the end of September, October, were desperate to have some sort of break, and I'm sure, like a lot of you, I've not managed to have much of a break or a holiday due to pandemic and lockdown and things like that. So we had one prior meeting to take place in London and get together, and then after that we were absolutely going to wing it, which means we left home from South Wales with no actual plan of where we were going to go. There were various options, possibly going into Europe, but we decided against that simply because there were so many COVID type restrictions and admin type things to do. So we decided therefore to spend some time in England, but again we had no idea where we were going to go. As it turned out, we decided that we were going to go and visit the Lake District, because neither of us have actually been to the Lake District before, and I thought this would be a good time to do it. So the whole point of these uploads is to give you the impressions of owning and driving the Ioniq 5. So this isn't going to be much of a travel log, but rather a car review. This was probably the most important journey that I needed to see when I got the car, and that is my journey from South Wales to my parents in London, which is a 185-mile trip. This journey was done, during warm conditions, 22 degrees at the start, lowering to 17 degrees by the time we arrived. But as you can see, it had pretty good efficiency, 3.4 miles per kilowatt hour, steady 70 miles an hour for most of the journey, and still had plenty of range left. This was the next day when we had a big family get together for the first time in months. Just celebrated my nephew's graduation, and all the people in this photo were all EV drivers. They were more than a little interested to see the Ioniq 5 up close. And now this is the next day, and we're planning to head off, and like I said, we decided that we were going to go up to the Lake District. So fully charged and ready to go. So our plan was to leave my parents, who live in north-east London, and head north up the M11. And then it was our plan just to cut across the lower Midlands on the A14 and get to the Rugby Gridserve bank of EV chargers to try that out, because I'd only heard good things so far. As you can see, it was a little bit rainy and damp, and I have to say it was also very blustery while driving this trip, very windy indeed, so as you will see, that affected the range a small amount. The in-car footage here is filmed with a GoPro attached to a headrest mount, which gives a very good view, but unfortunately the microphone on the GoPro picks up noise from all around the camera, so it sounds very noisy, but I have to say this car is extremely refined. Obviously there's a bit more road noise coming up on my particular car, because I've got 20-inch tyres, and also it's obviously damp, which adds to a bit of the road noise, but otherwise this is a wonderful GT Cruiser. We both agree it's an incredibly comfortable car. It's a real pleasure to drive long distance. Because we did this trip at the end of September, start of October, this was the time of the fuel shortage crisis. So unfortunately I didn't get much of this on film, but during this trip up we saw many kind of closed petrol stations with quite dangerous queuing actually from the petrol stations back onto the slip road of the motorway, indeed the A roads. It was hard not to feel a little smug being in an EV, and in fact during this holiday we had plenty of comments when we parked up that we must have been feeling smug because driving an EV during that particular time. Now as we were driving, and like I said, our plan was to head towards Rugby and then further north up to the Lake District. My wife noticed that there was an Ionity multi-EV hub at Leeds Skeleton Services. So because because of that, we decided to continue up on the A1M. And obviously that's a bit of a long way to get to the Lake District, but there was still an option that we may end up going to Scotland. Like I said, we were completely winging this journey, didn't have any plans, no hotels booked or anything. We're just going to book things as and when we arrived in certain places. So we decided to stay on the A1M and just head north all the way up to Leeds, Ionity. And this is us just turning off at Leeds. As you may have twigged, we used Apple Maps on the way up, and that seems to work very well indeed. Unfortunately, it's not wireless, and I wish the cable interaction would have been better and neater. Okay, so just arrived at Ionity, Leeds, Skelton, a little bit less than I expected. 197 miles, 25-mile range remaining. Not that impressive, to be honest, because I slowed down for the last probably 50 miles to 67. Tried to keep it around 70 for the first part of the journey, not much traffic on the road. So here we are at Leeds Skelton Lakes motorway service area with 6 high-powered Ionity chargers, all the bays empty, so it's lovely just to be able to drive up and plug in. It's worth noticing that with these high-powered chargers there are liquid-cooled cables which are pretty hefty and stiff, and I'm able-bodied, but if you're say have disability or have arthritis, it's going to be quite difficult to use. I think the designers should take into consideration, and also it being quite bright and sunny, so you can see it's quite difficult sometimes to see the screen. You really have to try and squint and try and shade the screen to actually see what's going on. The RFID card provided by Hyundai comes in very handy here. There's always this delay with the handshaking process before a charge starts, but I've not had any problems since I've had the car. It's always worked. And as you can see, off we go. Seems to be charging. I was hoping, because it was a fairly low state of charge, arrived from just 12%, that we were going to get absolutely massive charging speed straight away. But as you can see, it starts off a little bit slowly and then increased to over 100 kilowatts. To be honest, I'm quite spoilt now having the Ioniq 5, as I had a BMW i3 which used to max out around 47 to 48 kilowatts, and obviously from a low state of charge it's already over 110 kilowatts, and as you're about to see, it increases. What I found interesting here, due to the lowish position of the sun, is the gravity cold paint of my car actually appeared more matte grey under this light, which I've not seen before, but that's not altogether uncommon with the Hyundai colours. They seem to look quite different depending on the light that falls on the paintwork. So we'd just gone to stretch our legs and sit out in the sun, and realised I'd forgotten my mask. I came back to the car, and this is just after 6 minutes, and you can see already we're pulling in 184 kilowatts, which is obviously pretty brilliant. Something I'm not used to after having a BMW i3. And you can see that they're going to charge pretty quickly. These seem to be very well designed. You can see the light changes from white to pinky purple when it's charging. And there's that interesting matte grey look that my car actually has. And yeah, all the bays are free, but how long are they going to stay free? And now we come to the race against time. This Ioniq 5 on these Ionity high-speed charges at an incredibly fast rate. After stretching our legs, going to the toilet, and then having a bite to eat, I actually had to come back to the car mid-meal to unplug the car because it was now at 100%, and also all the bays were taken and there was a car waiting to take my place, so you can see how things change. But I never charge hog. I always will move my car as soon as it's reached the charge. On this trip I was going to charge to 100% every time because I didn't know where we were going to get another charge easily. There was still an option to go up to Scotland, but as you can see, the weather forecast was absolutely appalling, so we decided definitely we're going to the Lake District, continued up the A1M, and then cut across on the A66. This was now a much more relaxed drive on an A road, so the average speeds weren't quite as high. Obviously it was quite hilly and still quite windy. We were still using Apple Maps, and there was a slight irritation here because although it's wired, the socket that you use, which is a USB-A socket, is in the footwell in between the two seats, so you have to stretch each time to plug it in. It would have been nicer to have the seats in the storage area, cubbyhole. But hopefully in the new models there will at least be a USB-C socket, which I think they should have had really on this one. Anyway, we booked the hotel en route in Keswick, and we decided to go straight to the Booths supermarket chain. The journey from Leeds was 122 miles, and you can see that it used 55% of battery. And I'd already decided that when we charged, it was going to be a multi-point charging hub, as that would ensure a less chance of having to queue and increase the chance of you just driving up and plugging in. And that is exactly what happened with this entire journey, and that's why it's so important to have multi-point EV chargers, not just one or two. So I'm very thankful that Booth's supermarket chain have had a tie-up with Instavolt, although it works out a touch more expensive than Ionity and the Hyundai contract, but still very, very convenient. So the next morning, this was going to be our first walk, which is the Derwent Water Lake Walk, and unfortunately it was going to rain, and it did rain for the entire day, and it remained very, very grey. My wife and I both enjoy photography, but unfortunately when it's this grey and this rainy, it's all a bit monochrome and a bit dull looking, and it wasn't that enjoyable. But it was nice to have a long walk all the way around the lake and just take in the surroundings. And unfortunately this was going to be a feature of the entire holiday, because it just basically rained for the entire week we were there. Ironically, the following week was incredibly sunny. And these are just some of the features that you see as you do this long walk around Derwent Water. Again, as we enjoy photography, it's a real shame that the weather was so bad, because you just lose out on the majesty and the beauty of the area when it's so dull. There's some alpacas there, which is a bit of a turn up for the books. Don't expect to see those. And there's a big link between the area and the author Beatrix Potter. Now, I don't care what anyone says, this was one of the best things I've been to in a long while. It's the Pencil Museum, and as the name describes, this is all about the manufacture of pencils, which this area used to do. And this is how I had to prepare the car. This is the following day. I just put this vinyl down onto the seat so we could just throw wet things into the car if need be, without dirtying up the leather. And after checking out of our hotel, this is the journey up to Campbell's, which is a fell walk, just overlooking Derwent Water. Thankfully the weather was a little bit better today, so there's a bit of blue sky and sun, and we enjoyed our walk up Campbell's, and it was nice to get the majestic and colourful views that we missed out the day before. And after Campbell's, there's a short 18-mile drive or so to Aria Force Waterfalls National Trust. As you can see, the temperature's now dropped to around 11 degrees, and the car's efficiency seems to hover around 3 miles per kilowatt, so that's not too bad. And this, just in the car park, just giving an example of how big the Ioniq 5 is, it just looks like it can eat either of the cars for breakfast on either side. This is Cold Water. This is the shortest drive from the Aria Force Waterfalls. It's lovely and peaceful here. So it enables us to go for a short walk. If you're National Trust members, then the nearby parking areas tend to be free for National Trust members. That always comes in handy. And so from Ullswater, there's going to be a shortest drive over to Grasmere. Nice narrow B roads. So to get over to Grasmere, we have to pass over the Kirkstone Pass. This is the highest pass in the Lake District, with a height of around 1,489 feet. The weather was pretty good, not as good as it could have been, but it's obviously a stunning road, and highly recommended. to do if you can. I haven't included too much of the in-car footage of this pass because you tend to get motion sick when you watch footage like this back on the screen, but it's highly recommended, and it would have been a nice quick drive over to Grasmere, but there was quite a massive traffic jam near the end. The journey took longer than it could have done. So arrival in Grasmere. Again, this is the sun showing its face, and because of the traffic jam and obviously regenning on the mountain pass, the efficiency was pretty good. This enabled us, while we're in Grasmere, to go into the William Wordsworth Dove House, where the poet often stayed during his holidays and did some of his greatest poetry and writing works. And this is Dove House, and as you can see, very different feeling when the weather is beautiful and the sun comes out. The weather from the afternoon was very much sunshine and showers, but it enabled us to go for a long walk around the lake and take in some of the sights. So after a few hours in Grasmere, it was now time to drive over to our next hotel, which will be in Windermere, and this was probably one of the narrowest roads we used while we were on this holiday. This was a fairly short route, more like a B road, and unfortunately during this footage there isn't any moment when a car passes us, although we did pass some cars but we weren't filming at the time. But this was obviously quite tricky. The Ioniq 5 is a big car, but it's not horrendously big. It's bigger than what I'm normally used to, because I tend to prefer very small compact cars, but this was still pretty easy to manoeuvre down these narrow B roads, which are quite common in the UK and especially in the Lake District. So again, it was only a 15-mile journey from Grasmere to our next hotel in Windermere, which is the Waterhead Inn, and this is right at the top of Lake Windermere. Beautiful sight. As you may know, Lake Windermere is the largest lake in England, measuring around 14.73 square kilometres. It was just lovely for it not to be raining and to have such a relaxing, beautiful view. Just a few steps from our hotel. It was lovely to spend the evening chilling out. We checked out Ambleside, which is nearby, and we're just hoping for more of the same great weather for the next day. So the weather was absolutely atrocious. We made the executive decision that today was going to be an indoor type of day because we were National Trust members. We were going to see a lot of the National Trust type Beatrix Potter museums. One of the shocks that you can see in these type of weather conditions were that the efficiency of the Ioniq is not the best. It was really a shock to see efficiency of 2.3 miles per kilowatt hour before the engine heats up. And this was our first stop at Hilltop. Beatrix Potter, this better be.
Oh my god, look at this. Where are we going? Round the way.
The house was okay, but after the house we decided to go to the Beatrix Potter Gallery. Again, that was just 2.6 miles away, and at least the efficiency had improved. It was still raining very heavily, but the gallery, I thought, or we both thought, was much more interesting, and you tended to get a feel for who the author was and a bit more about her life. And from there was just another very short drive over to Constant Waters, and nearby was the Ruskin Museum. Now this is a very small little museum that is tucked away on the main high street, and we went there specially to have a look at the Donald Campbell Bluebird Museum, which is there. My wife had no idea who Donald Campbell was and wasn't particularly interested in going, but during this visit it was actually me who had to drag her away after about 2 hours. It's a small museum, but I thought it was, well, quite emotional and very evocative and poignant, just looking through all the photos and all the exhibits from the speed records that Donald Campbell held, and that led to his death during a speed attempt. And from there over to another National Trust property called Ray Castle, and this is just having a close look at the rear view cameras. Although it was still raining heavily, this camera still comes in handy with the 360 and sky view cameras, really giving a very clear picture, so there's no chance of you parking incorrectly or hitting anything you shouldn't. And yes, it's still an irritation that you don't have a rear wash wiper blade, but the cameras do help to make up for it. And here's just a picture of the entrance of Ray Castle. And from there, soon after, we visited the Windermere Jetty Museum. This has lots of examples of boats being on Lake Windermere. There's a huge history of boat and yacht ownership on the lake. And this is just an example there's only one leaf here, but the day before there were several leaves stuck to the rear windscreen, which I had to pull off by hand. If I had a rear wiper, it would have been easy. So our stay in the Lake District was coming to an end, and this is now kind of on our journey home. We decided to head south, and as like I said previously, just decided to stop as we were going south through the Lake District at another branch of Booths situated in Kendal. And like the previous one in Keswick, it had more than one charger, 4 chargers, just like the one in Keswick, as in here in Kendal. And that, as you can see, always enables you to get, or more often than not, get a free charger. Otherwise you're just going to have to wait and queue. So again, making use of the rear view cameras. I think personally, I'd prefer having a charger on the front of a car, because it just means you can just drive up straight away and plug in without any problems. Whereas with a rear situated charger, and Tesla are the same, you always have to reverse in, which is always a bit more of a hassle. But as you can see, rear view cameras make things a cinch, being helped out with all the parking sensors as well. We had just over 50% by the time of our arrival at this branch of Booths, and we just decided to plan to stay here for an hour and just walk around Kendal, taking some of the sites while charged. So we didn't go into the shop and get a refund. There's just the again confirmation: 49 kilowatts, 51%, and not long. To get to 80% is 29 minutes. And here are some of the few sites. Obviously, I've taken a lot more photos of our travels, but there's just 1 or 2 photos of Kendal, and then going up for a walk to have a look at Kendal Castle, which is just a ruin, but it's still a nice walk with great views over the surrounding countryside and over Kendal itself. And then on return back to the Booths car park, you can see the other cars had left, but there was another UEV situated there. And again, this is at the time of the video, this is around 40p per kilowatt hour, so it took on 38 kilowatt hours and cost £15.24, so a lot more expensive than the Ionity contract. And once we finished in Kendal, it was a short drive down to Sizer Castle, and this is just an example of, I think, why I preferred the Ioniq over the Kia EV6. If you're designing an EV, then it should have certain advantages that only an EV can have. So one, with having a completely flat floor plan, and the fact that that central storage area can slide back, and it just enables you to kind of get out of the car from either side, and that's always like the BMW i3 was exactly the same. So I kind of still wanted to keep that for my next car. And this is a picture of Sizer Castle, which is another National Trust property, still owned by the Strickland family. But this was a lovely walk in the gardens of a fantastic house. Now again, we're heading back gradually back home, so down south through Cumbria, and we decided, although we didn't need to stop at junction 27 off the M6 to have a look at these MFG chargers, because I've never used one before, and again, really impressive. There are all these other brands, Ionity, Instavolt, GridServe, but this company, MFG, who own a lot of the fuel stations in Britain, are slowly and quietly getting on with installing plenty of high-powered chargers. They're all fast chargers, at least 150 kilowatt. I think most are 175 kilowatt, and don't need any RFID cards or apps, just contactless, reasonably priced. And this was my first kind of gone one, and as expected, no problems at all. So very impressive. And also with this, there's a canopy, a rain canopy over the chargers, so you're not getting rained upon, which is always a bit of a bonus, because in most chargers, as we all know as EV owners, we're very rarely protected from the elements unless the charger's in a car park. These are 150 kilowatt chargers and not 175. Nice and reliable, nice and fast. As usual, there's always this long delay in getting the handshake between the car and the charger, but as previously, no any problems at all charging the Ioniq. So after the charge up that we didn't really need, we continued to head back down on the M6. And unfortunately, there were loads of roadworks, and also there's going to be a heavy traffic jam ahead. So because of that, we decided to cut across and join the A49, which basically traverses down through England and Wales. And this enabled me to have a nice little run, a sporty run in the Ioniq 5. This is certainly no sports car, being that it weighs well over 2 tons, but it does handle very well in that EV way, because all the weight's under your feet, so it still handles well with good turn-in, good physical brakes as well as regenerative braking. And as it turned out, we decided to stop at Leominster, where there was another Instavolt charge, so we decided just to have another charge there. And then by now it was dark, and we had a really nice little run on barely trafficked roads. I was really hoping for some matrixy sexiness with the headlights. The spread of the LED lights in the Ioniq 5 is excellent, really widespread across the road, with pretty good range, but I was hoping that it would have some matrix lights. I thought it did have matrix headlights, but after reading the specification on getting home, no, it doesn't have any matrix headlights. But even so, really good and easy night driving. And like I said, the car handles very well, because all that weight is under your feet, so the car feels very planted when you're driving at a brisk pace. And of course, it also helps that you have over 300 brake horsepower and 600 Newton meters of torque. That's always going to come in handy. So we finally made it home after a very long journey. We managed to cover 882 miles in just 7 days, and the overall average for the entire journey was around 3.3 miles per kilowatt hour. When we started the journey, it was very warm, 20 degrees and above, and on ending of most of the journey we saw very low temperatures of 12 or 10 degrees and below. Well, anyway, that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Sorry about the audio quality in places, but if you like this video, then please give me a thumbs up. And around 2 or 3 weeks after this video was made, I came down with COVID, which is why I've been delayed, but everything's okay now, and I hope to post some more videos. Bye for now.